Alright everyone, we start off today talking about Joe Biden's crazy lunatic plan on student loan debt forgiveness. Now of course the government can't magically materialize wealth out of thin air. What this entails is inflation. And the cost is passed off to certain groups of people who no sane person, if he was being honest about the actual ramifications of his forgiveness plan, no sane person would actually suggest them. A politician would lose a huge amount of support if you came forth and told people what really this plan entails. Now, the basic sum and substance is that if you make under $125K a year, which is a pretty high cap, admittedly, you're eligible for $10,000 in total student loan debt relief. If you have Pell, that is, I believe, need-based aid, specifically, it ups to $20,000. Now, this would wipe out the remaining student loan debt for tens of millions of people. Well, there are certainly positive things to say about that. The problem is where you're actually getting that money from and who is left out. So you're leaving out people who paid off their loans, regardless of their income. They could be making considerably less than that cap, still have paid off their student loan debt. Sorry, you don't get any forgiveness. People who didn't go to college, disproportionately going to come from the lower and working classes, because a lot of people in those classes, they're like, well, you know, I'm smart, I could easily get into a good state college or something, but, you know, money is really tight, and, you know, I'm not going to take out 50 grand in student loan debt and take the long shot odds, which is what it is at this point, that I end up graduating high enough in my class to actually make a return on that without paying off debt for 20 or 30 years. There are people, they're in their fucking 50s, they're still dealing with student loan debt. We already have a crippled and overheated economy that's overrun with inflation, and that's the other aspect. By pumping hundreds of billions of dollars into the economy, which is what will happen, there will be more spending among those that now don't have that monthly amount that they owe. What will end up happening is inflation will kick in. It's not even going to be an entire point of inflation, but it will exist, and that's on top of the inflation that we already have. Technically paling in comparison to the other funny money handouts that Biden has engaged in, but it's there. It would have an effect. Who ends up, therefore, paying that total? Again, the lower classes and people with some degree of savings, middle classers into the upper middle class. The asset-heavy class, the truly rich, the 1% of the 1%, aren't affected by inflation quite so much. And of course, they can offshore and stuff. If inflation kicks in, their yacht just ends up denominated as being worth more, so it's a store of value. The plan is insane. It's also likely to be blocked. Nancy Pelosi, as recently as June, was saying that Biden didn't have the unilateral authority to forgive debt at all. That is, the only thing that they're comfortable with is, under the auspices of the pandemic emergency, pausing student loan debt repayment. Now, some people are still repaying. Other people, they're just sitting on it because they're like, well, there's no interest building up. It doesn't matter if I pay it. It's a debt jubilee. Isn't this wonderful? They've adjusted their spending, by the way, accordingly because they don't have that monthly cost, and that's a big problem because now you've got those individuals making unwise fiscal decisions. Much like it's unwise to take out a bunch of debt that you don't have a reasonable assurance you can pay off. This should be addressed by a long-term overhaul of the way we think about the educational system. Getting government out of it to the greatest degree possible. Stop the process of dumping huge amounts of grant money into colleges only to see them raise their prices. Why has there never been any formal attempt by the U.S. government to crack down on universities and colleges that simply up their tuition according to how much extra money they're getting already from the taxpayers year over fiscal year? The whole purpose is to lower the cost for students. Say, look, you've got these very talented students that have a great deal of fiscal need. They're clearly qualified. This kid graduated top in his class, but he comes from a very poor background. Well, he should be working at NASA. He should be working in a nuclear reactor, but he needs help. So we're going to give him various aid. But as soon as you start giving aid to those people, dropping the cost that they're paying to go into college, the college simply raises the tuition rates. Or they take the money that they get and they build another sports stadium, or they build another a green, or they build another student center. I remember UVM building the Davis Center. It was never necessary. They just decided that they wanted a more impressive student center, basically, with a few stores and a bar actually inside of it, and shit like that. And it was very funny, and I think it cost tens of millions of dollars, and they put all the bells and whistles on it. Now a BLM flag flies out front, or it was years ago. Very interesting. The frivolous side of public education is one problem. The government being involved driving the price up year over year is a big problem. And then along comes the Biden plan. Again, though, some of the more impoverished echelons of society are going to suffer from this. Again, didn't go to college because they couldn't, etc. The B students from the lower class, they're not really going to college. You're really fucking over people who took out private debt to like buy their own truck because they went into the trades and they're like, well, I'm going to do plumbing and make 60, 70K a year. Not bad, by the way. I've got this separate debt. It's not student loan debt, but I had to take it out anyway. They're not getting any relief. And again, people who already paid off their student loans. What about people on the margins? So there's a hard cap of 125K, including for people that got Pell, by the way. What if you made 126? As far as I know, the plan doesn't even involve scaling. So that doesn't really make sense. Is there a fade out and that's just the final level? Well, we're going to forgive $1,000 of your student debt. Another problem exists when you consider the average student loan debt is considerably more than $10,000. And again, disproportionately, in some cases, the major debt's going to be held by professionals that make over 125K, but, you know, those payments add up. It's definitely scalar towards the upper end, people with masters and PhDs and so forth. The other problem is, therefore, without restructuring and maybe privatizing the debt in the process, by the way, putting it beyond government purview specifically, a person with considerably more than 10K in student loan debts is still making those payments. So it's not really benefiting them after all now, is it? What I think is going to happen, if this goes through at all, it could be stopped by Congress. Again, even some Democrats have been hesitant to endorse the concept that this can be done at the executive level. If it isn't injuncted by a court, and that could happen because there's that Pell differential, by the way, they could find that to be discriminatory. Well, you're saying that the fact that a person got a certain type of grant automatically qualifies them for double debt relief. Well, you can't do that. I'm surprised that he didn't try to make it partially race-based or something like that. He did that with farms. He did that with restaurants. He got shot down both times by the court. I guess he finally wised up and said, oh, I'm just going to make it denominated as far as the need-based aid they did or did not receive, and we'll call it a day, assuming it passes through. People in the lower classes, they get the debt relief, will switch from eating 2 meals a day of ramen to getting 3 meals a day of Campbell's tomato soup. Well, it's a positive thing, I suppose, but it's not exactly uplifting the economy. People who are unwise, which is the majority of people in the population, will adjust their spending. They're paying less for this, which means they'll just pay more for frivolous things. Cheap Chinese crap, maybe upgrade their car or something like that. I mean, that's probably beyond the scope of people in the working class at this moment because of Bidenomic inflation. And they'll travel a little bit more. It'll overheat the economy, and then the Fed will have to step in. But all of these problems that happen will happen after the midterms. That's when shit will hit. That's when you see the inflation. That's when you see that it really hasn't uplifted anyone, again, assuming that this goes through. But it won't be evident right away. This is effectively just Biden's way of trying to buy votes. But I think that it may not work, actually. Here's why. For every person that gets the debt relief, there's another person who didn't go to college and now is expected to pay, in part for this, or who already paid off their debt. They're not getting any extra relief. They're not getting a $10,000 check from having gone to college. That would have been more equitable. It would have been more equitable. It would make more sense if you simply cut a fucking 10K stimulus for every American. That would be a completely level playing field. You know, I would depose it. It would hyper-inflate the economy and you'd have many problems. But at the very least, the misery would be equally shared, and the benefit, therefore, too. I don't know that he'll be ruled even by Congress as having the authority to do this. They'll definitely, the Democrats will support the idea, but then you have to get past the Senate. Are the Democrats going to unilaterally use like the reconciliation process via the House and Senate bouncing the bill back and forth to get this done? Will a court step in and say that some provision in this bill is unacceptable? This could be a major defeat, by the way, for the Biden administration if that happens. It is a gamble. They're desperate before the midterms. So they're trying to buy several tens of millions of votes because, they don't have anything else really to run on right now, certainly not in the economic sense. It's a grift. It's a con job. That's about all. Peace out.